LiesOfP is an extremely fun game that tries to be something it's not and kinda suffers for it. The Soulsborne games, that is, games in the style of Dark Souls and Bloodborne by FromSoft, hold a special place in many people's hearts and the gaming community at large. They are, at this point, their own genre. Just like Mario is a platformer and Final Fantasy is a... well anyways, it's a whole thing. There have been many entries into the genre, but they consistently miss on what makes the Soulsborne games so good. It's not the way menus look, it's not enemies hiding around corners to get in cheap damage, it's not even weapon variety or magic. You could probably make a really good Soulsborne game with one weapon type. What makes a Soulsborne game is the level of world design. Having giant bosses and set pieces doesn't mean much if they don't make sense in the world, and if you don't take advantage of what combat options you have, they may as well not even be there. To this day, not a single other company has been able to capture the magic of the genre like the creators of it, and LiesOfP is no exception. However, where LiesOfP misses in its exploration and world layout, it makes up for in combat mechanics and customization. LiesOfP puts you in the shoes of Pinocchio, who I am not going to bother explaining the backstory for. It's Pinocchio. You have Jiminy Cricket with you. You wake up on a train in a train station and are asked for help by a psychic voice reminiscent of The Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past. Upon picking up your starting weapon that also determines your starting stats, you exit the train and discover what is actually one of my favorite environments I've ever seen in a video game. It's a clockwork town, just shy of steampunk, but absolutely rooted in the style. The size of the town feels enormous, but as you progress, you find it's a mostly linear path. Sure, you can and likely will circle back around to the starting stargazers, which I will likely use interchangeably with the word bonfire, but otherwise it's a straight path with one or two rooms with enemies and loot you can skip over. Eventually you will circle back around to the area's hub, but then you just move straight through it. It's almost like a plus sign. Once you encounter your first boss, you meet the game's level up lady, Sophia, who gives you a short explanation of current events and tasks you with rescuing Geppetto. Walking over rooftops and through the streets, eventually you locate the man himself, your father, and he tasks you with saving this dying city. And that's basically the gameplay loop. You walk a mostly linear path, fight a boss or two, go back to the hotel Sophia stays in, upgrade, go out, and do the next area. It honestly shares more in common with the original Super Mario Bros. Than it does with the Dark Souls in terms of level design. However, that's not to say the level design is bad. On the contrary, as a linear game, the set pieces are phenomenal. I mentioned this was one of my favorite worlds I have seen, and I meant it. The movement of the enemy puppets is unnerving, the city, factory, and church are all beautiful, and scattered bodies of both puppets and humans tell their own story. There are also documents a la Resident Evil scattered around to give you a little more context for the locales and the role they play in the story, and that is something else LiesOfP does better than its founders. Storytelling. It actually tells you the story. No longer do you have to read the description of a sharpening stone you picked up at the beginning of the game for context on a boss you killed 5 hours in. It by no means spoon-feeds you the story. You still have to care about it, and you can totally ignore it, and you would still have a good time. But when you speak to the characters, they speak plainly and tell you exactly what they mean rather than cryptic nonsense FromSoft is known for. The game also has a fairly clear story pathing rooted in the lore of Pinocchio. Occasionally, you are given one or two options when talking to NPCs. One is a lie and the other is the truth. You pick one, move on, and get an ending based on how you responded. There is a third ending possible depending on the final choice at the end of the game, but I won't give spoilers, and from what I've heard, it's not exactly a good ending. Gameplay-wise, LiesOfP also shines brightly. Weapons all feel very unique, and you can actually customize them to suit your build and playstyle to an incredible degree. Every weapon you find has a blade and a handle, each with their own properties. Stat-wise, the blade determines the attack type of the weapon, while the handle determines what stats the weapon scales off of, as well as its special abilities. You usually find a weapon and a handle together, but they can be disassembled and reconstructed in any way you see fit. There are also boss weapons you can get the same way you can do in a Souls game, and they only have the weapon itself. There's not a blade and a handle. Do you like the speed of the dagger but want it to scale off motivity or strength? Go for it. Did you find a great sword that you really like but you're already all in on advance, which is magic? Slap the blade onto a handle with advanced scaling and go ham. However, there's another mechanic to take into account. Every blade and handle has its own unique attack that uses resources below the health bar called Fable. Think of them almost like limit breaks. As you attack, you build up Fable, and each part has its own Fable attack that consumes a certain number of bars, and the variety is pretty drastic. Some attacks you can use 1 bar and it causes your next attack to do tons more damage, or you can enchant a weapon with electric element to cause status effects to your opponents, while others can use 2 or more bars to do big attacks or giant swings, all of which have their own pros and cons. So what does one do if they have built Advance, but really like a handle that scales off motivity? Well, you customize it. There are rare items called cranks that can increase or decrease a weapon's scaling of a handle. The advanced handle simply increases the advanced scaling of a weapon, while motivity and technique can increase the scaling by one level of the stat you're boosting while lowering the opposing stat. This lets you fully customize your build with the attacks, special attacks, and stats that you want without having to plan ahead and pick your weapons and stats before you even start the game. Wait, there is more. You'll notice I haven't mentioned dual wielding or shields yet. That's because they don't exist. Instead, Pinocchio's left arm is augmentable, reminiscent of Psycho. There are many options, from leaving it naked for a big punching attack to a hookshot style weapon that pulls smaller foes towards you, and an electrical discharge, and my personal favorite, gun. In addition to all of this madness, you have standard rings, accessories, armor, etc., which can alter the damage resistances or increase your damage against certain kinds of foes, along with a weight system that affects dodges and rolls, and cosmetics. Glorious, wonderful cosmetics. You can have top hats, a wolf mask, a Rudolph nose, there's tons of cosmetics. While they don't directly alter gameplay, they can make subsequent playthroughs just a little more entertaining. None of this even goes into consumables, which are actually pretty important and useful, the skill tree system from the puppet chair, or the game's finer details like when the enemy health bars turns white. Game's fun as hell. Sound design wise, it's fine. Voice acting is solid. You and your enemies make noises. I don't know. There's honestly not much there. Not a whole lot of music playing or anything else going on besides ambiance and during boss fights, which is very Soulsborne. I think this is one of the departments where the game had gone a little less Dark Souls and a little more Hi-Fi Rush. I might have enjoyed it a little more. Mixing in some metal or maybe some ambient steampunk music while you play might enhance your experience, but in a game like this, honestly, audio design isn't that important, besides knowing which direction you're being attacked from. Being a Souls-like, honestly, holds back LiesOfP in many ways, partially because of the things like music and partially just because of expectations. If you go into P thinking you're going to get a Dark Souls experience to tie you over until the next real one drops, you may find yourself a little disappointed, depending on what you're looking for. It doesn't scratch that exploration and reward itch outside of familiar looking menus and stats. What it does well though is being fun. With combat that's incredibly fun, as well as big bosses and set pieces, LiesOfP absolutely stands out as one of the best games of the Soulsborne genre, even if it still falls short of its parents' expectations. As a Soulsborne game, I give it a 7 out of 10. It's about as good as Demon's Souls, but misses the mark of Dark Souls 1 through 3 or its true biological parent, Bloodborne. However, as a standalone video game based purely on how enjoyable it is, LiesOfP gets a 9 out of 10. Someone looking for the next Bloodborne might not find what they're looking for here, but will still find a great time if they're willing to look past the benchmark and just play the game as its own entity. I hope this helped you make a decision on whether or not to purchase LiesOfP. If it did, let me know in the comments below, and also hit that subscribe button for more top 10 lists, reviews, and let's plays, and of course gaming streams. This is Dummies.